The Weather Prediction Center updated its extended temperature outlook this morning. For most of the central and eastern United States, it shows what we have been waiting for, the anomalous upper-level ridge that produced the second heat dome of summer 2026, the one that hit Montana at 115 degrees that drove the upper peninsula of Michigan to 100 degrees, that pushed heat into the northeast while simultaneously loading the southern United States with oppressive humidity, is beginning to weaken. The most intense phase of the current heat event is ending. That is the good news. I want to give it to you directly because you have earned it after weeks of heat emergency coverage. Now I want to show you 4 maps, not the temperature map that is improving, 4 different maps from 4 different forecasting systems, tracking 4 different types of hazards that are simultaneously turning to their darkest shading as the heat dome retreats. Because the heat ending and what replaces it are 2 entirely different stories, and most of the coverage this week is going to tell you the first story and miss the second entirely. Map 1. The National Hurricane Center's Atlantic Tropical Weather Outlook. As of this morning, a tropical disturbance that formed in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico off the Florida coast has a probability of developing into a named storm within the next 7 days that the NHC has elevated significantly in the last 2 model cycles. The disturbance is moving slowly westward over water that I have covered in this series as running near record warm, the loop current eddy situation, the 2 to 4 degrees above normal Gulf surface temperatures, the deep warm layer that I specifically flagged as a rapid intensification environment in my prior hurricane season coverage. If this system becomes Tropical Storm Bertha, the second named storm of the 2026 Atlantic season, it will be doing so in water conditions that gave Idalia in 2023 a 24-hour rapid intensification event from tropical storm to Category 4. The NHC is tracking it. So am I. Map 2, the Storm Prediction Center's Day 4 to 8 severe weather outlook. The heat dome retreating does not mean severe weather retreating. As I covered in the Ring of Fire video in this series, when a heat dome breaks, it does not simply evaporate. Its energy gets transferred into the thunderstorm environment on its perimeter, the boundary where retreating hot, unstable air meets the approaching cooler and more active air from the west. The SPC's medium-range discussion for the period following the current heat dome's peak is showing the same high cape, high shear environment on the dome's northern and western flank that produced the Ring of Fire storm sequence after the July 4th heat dome. The specific signature: southerly flow maintaining deep moisture across the plains and Ohio Valley, westerly flow at mid-levels providing shear, and the dome's edge as the triggering boundary. High risk, or at least moderate risk, of severe weather across the central to eastern United States is in the model guidance for the July 22-24 window. Maps for that period are showing the darker shading on the SPC's color scale that represents higher confidence in significant severe weather. Map 3, the U.S. Drought Monitor. This is the one that I think deserves the most attention in this video because it is the one that most people are not following in the current news cycle, and it is the one where the darkening has been most dramatic. The Drought Monitor, published every Thursday by a collaboration of NOAA, USDA, and the National Drought Mitigation Center, uses a 6-level scale to categorize drought intensity. D0 represents abnormally dry conditions. D1 is moderate drought. D2 is severe drought. D3 is extreme drought. D4 is exceptional drought, the darkest category, typically shown in deep red or maroon approaching black on the map, representing conditions where drought is producing catastrophic agricultural impacts, critical water shortages, and extreme fire danger simultaneously. As of this week's Drought Monitor update, the D4 exceptional drought category has expanded to cover a larger geographic footprint across the interior West than at any point in the 2026 season so far. Utah, Nevada, western Colorado, portions of Wyoming and Oregon, a swath of the western United States is now in the darkest category on the scale. The Four Corners region, which I covered in the flash drought and wildfire videos in this series, is now broadly at D3 to D4 conditions. The soil moisture deficit in these areas is so severe that even above normal monsoon rainfall over the next several weeks cannot fully recover it before the end of the current fire season. The Drought Monitor map is one of those visual displays where seeing the dark color spread across a large area of the country should produce a specific kind of alarm. Not the acute alarm of an incoming hurricane or a tornado warning, but the slow, grinding alarm of a landscape that has been pushed past a threshold and will take months to years to recover from. The D4 expansion matters specifically in the context of the heat dome's end, and here is why. When the heat dome breaks, it typically delivers some rainfall to the regions that were under it. After weeks of suppressed convection, the atmospheric pattern shift allows storm systems to penetrate into areas they have been blocked from. Some of those areas will get meaningful rainfall, but the areas in D4 exceptional drought conditions will not recover from a single rain event. The soil is too dry, the aquifer levels too low, the vegetation too stressed, and the specific danger in the transition period when the heat is lessening but the drought conditions are still at their peak. is that the dying heat. Dome often produces wind events as it retreats, winds without the moisture to extinguish fires or the rainfall to suppress ignitions, wind on the most drought-compromised landscape of the season. Map 4, the National Fire Danger Rating map from the National Interagency Fire Center. I've covered the wildfire situation extensively in prior videos in this series, and the numbers are already extraordinary. The NIFC is at Preparedness Level 5, its maximum rating in the Northwest Geographic Area. The National Fire Danger Map for the coming days shows critical to extreme conditions, the darkest shading on the fire danger scale, across eastern Oregon, eastern Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. This is precisely the zone where the heat dome's departure will deliver the specific combination of factors that fire meteorologists fear most. An atmospheric trough pushing through the region with strong northwesterly winds below normal. Humidity and no meaningful precipitation on a landscape where fuel moisture is at its minimum and suppression resources are already fully committed. So what you have as the heat dome retreats is not a return to normal. You have the heat domain transferring its energy into 4 different hazard systems simultaneously. The Gulf gets the tropical moisture and the warm water it needs to spin up a named storm. The central and eastern United States gets the severe weather outbreak that always follows a heat dome in this seasonal regime. The West gets the wind event on a drought extreme landscape that threatens to turn the current fire complex from 84 large fires into something significantly larger. And the drought monitor captures the cumulative landscape damage that makes all of these secondary hazards worse than they would be in a well-watered landscape. Let me spend more time on the Gulf tropical development because this is the one that has the most time-critical implications. The specific disturbance being tracked by the NHC this morning formed in the northeastern Gulf in a location and configuration that Michael Lowry, Local 10's hurricane specialist, described as undergoing a non-tropical to tropical transition, with the initial spin concentrated at 20,000 feet before descending to the surface. I covered this specific development pathway in detail in the Monster Storm video in this series, a top-down development from mid-level spin, rather than a classical surface-low tropical genesis. This pathway is associated with subtropical to tropical transitions that, when they find warm water and low shear, can intensify rapidly because the organizational energy stored in the hybrid structure gets released thermally as the warm core establishes. The specific track question for this system, the one the models are disagreeing on, is whether it moves northeastward along the east coast as a subtropical hybrid system or turns westward into the warm central Gulf. I described the physics of this bifurcation in detail in the Monster Storm video. A robust subtropical ridge to the north steers the system westward over warm water and into tropical development. An approaching shortwave trough provides a northeastward escape route into the Atlantic. The current ensemble guidance is showing model variance on this track question, with the westward over warm water scenario representing the higher risk path for the Gulf Coast communities that are simultaneously managing the aftermath of weeks of heat and drought. If the westward track verifies, this system would be moving over the loop current region of the eastern Gulf, the same region I specifically flagged as having favorable rapid intensification conditions due to the loop current's recent eddy shedding history and the near-record ocean heat content. The Big Bend coast of Florida, which I covered as the specific high storm surge risk geography in that video, sits at the end of that westward track scenario. The Idalia 2023 precedent, rapid intensification from tropical storm to Category 4 in 24 hours over eastern Gulf warm water, is the specific historical event that makes this track scenario alarming, even from its current low organization starting point. The severe weather threat that the heat dome's departure generates is also something I want to explain specifically in this context, because it connects to mechanisms I covered in the Ring of Fire and MCV training storm videos. The cape that has been building under the heat dome, the convective available potential energy that I described as the fuel reserve for thunderstorms, has been accumulating for the duration of the heat dome's presence over the central United States. Every day, the dome suppressed convection was another day of energy accumulation in the moist air layer beneath it. When the first shortwave trough pushes through the dome's retreating western edge, it will find the most cape-rich environment of the summer so far. The storms that fire in that environment will access energy reserves that produce the kind of explosive development from ordinary thunderstorm to organized severe weather within the first 30 to 60 minutes of initiation. The period from July 22 to 25 is the window I'm watching for the most organized severe weather threat in this transition. The specific geographic target for the severe weather transition centers on the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes region, and the Midwest. The same zone that I covered in the training storm video when the MCV-driven training event threatened flooding in the Ohio Valley and Appalachian corridor. That zone now faces the Ring of Fire transition threat on the backside of the second heat dome. The same soil saturation from the July 5 to 10 events, the The same vulnerable community geography in Appalachian hollows, and now additional CAPE from a dome that has been loading the atmosphere for 2 more weeks than the first dome did. Let me close with this specific action that each of these 4 maps requires from different audiences, because the answer is different depending on which of the 4 you are closest to. For the Gulf Coast, from the Florida Panhandle through Louisiana and into East Texas, this is the week to be watching the NHC's tropical weather outlook daily, not the standard morning news cycle. The system developing in the Gulf has the potential to become Tropical Storm Bertha by mid-next week, and its track will determine whether it produces flooding impacts over Louisiana and Mississippi or takes a different path toward the Florida Big Bend coast that I covered in the prior video. Either path has flooding implications. The flood risk from even a tropical storm strength system moving slowly over the Gulf Coast is the primary hazard, not wind. New Orleans, which I note is already at 90% pumping capacity based on Governor Landry's preparedness briefing this week, is in the specific zone of concern for the westward track scenario. Know your flood plan. Know whether your property's drainage area is served by the pump system. Know your elevation relative to the surrounding area. For the central and eastern United States in the Ring of Fire transition zone, the severe weather threat in the July 22nd to 25 window is real. The same guidance I gave in the Ring of Fire video applies. When you see the temperature drop and feel the cool outflow air arrive ahead of the storm system, that is not the all clear. That is the storm's advance signal, the core of the system with the heaviest rain, the strongest winds, and the embedded tornado threat in the most organized cells arrives behind the outflow. Do not go outside to enjoy the cool air when the severe thunderstorm watches are posted. Monitor the SPC convective outlooks. Know your shelter option. For the interior west and the northwest, in the critical fire weather zone, the wind event that accompanies the heat dome's departure is the specific hazard window I want you to track this weekend. When the dome retreats and the pressure gradient increases behind the departing high, wind gusts of 30 to 50 miles per hour across the landscape. As I described in the wildfire videos, Eastern Oregon, Idaho, Montana can drive fire behavior that no amount of suppression resource can manage. If you are in a wildland-urban interface community in those states, have your go bag ready, have your evacuation route in mind, and be monitoring your county's emergency alert system over the next 72 hours. The combination of peak drought conditions and post-dome wind is the specific recipe for the kind of fire run that can overtake a community faster than evacuation orders can be issued. And for anyone whose water supply depends on the Colorado River system, the Great Basin aquifers, or the Pacific Northwest snowpack that has been below 1/3 of normal all year, the drought monitor's D4 expansion is the signal that the summer's accumulated moisture deficit has reached the point where it will take more than this year's monsoon to recover. Water management decisions that you have been considering, conservation measures, alternative sourcing, storage capacity planning, need to be made now, not after the drought reaches D4 in your specific county. The heat is ending. 4 maps are turning black. They are not the same emergency as the heat, and they are not separate from it. They are where the heat's energy went. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I will be watching all 4 systems through the weekend. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.